Many of you might have heard that Jordan Peterson granted an interview to the Times in the UK. And he was invited by a very cordial, deferential letter from the editor and the writer. And the family was considering it and wanting to get his health complications and explain them and get them out of the way. They agreed to the interview. Peterson has a book, Beyond Order, coming out March 2nd, and his publisher, Penguin Random House, thought it would be a good idea. They were promised a very fair and deferential treatment and that they weren't going to write sensationalistic articles. They granted it. It turned into an utter hit piece. And the writer, Decca Aitkenhead, seems to be a very malicious person. And I really want to go over the larger implications. I'm going to go over a few quotes from the column specifically, but I want to go over the larger implications as to what this means in terms of us as a society, that we can continue to behave this way and we continually divide. It was a hit piece not only on Peterson, but somehow his daughter, Michaela Peterson, who was there monitoring the interview. Her father's not completely out of the woods. He's not completely well, and she was going to be there in an effort to protect her father. And so obviously this was conducted over a video chat. The full audio is released, and the audio that was released by the Petersons is very, very different than what was in the Times, the article that was there. This reporter just did a hatchet job upon them, and it is from a miserable soul of a writer with a horrific past. This is leftist drivel at its best. But one of the things that came out of the article that I found to be excruciating is the fact that it was stated and then picked up on, and this is the worst part about it, is that it's like that game of telephone that somebody reports something and it's a little bit off, and then somebody else reports it, and the importance of it might grow. But it was reported in the article that perhaps Peterson suffered from schizophrenia, that he was diagnosed with it. This is false, and it was firmly in the tapes very clear that the family was saying that he did not suffer from schizophrenia, that they wanted to give him medication for schizophrenia, but because he didn't have schizophrenia, that would be fruitless and not worthwhile. But the writer tried to frame it in such a way that he was suffering from schizophrenia. It was terrible, and that is one of the worst things that comes out of the article, because when you see that reverberate through the news, and it's just not that the people do their individual research, not that they go and listen to the complete tapes as I did, but then they just piggyback off of the original reporting, and then some people amplify it, and this is how fake news gets spread. And it is really condemnation of journalism that this happens over and over again, and that people are just looking to sensationalize columns. So just to be clear, Jordan Peterson does not have schizophrenia, despite what you might read from other sources. It is an effort to try to take down his ability to communicate with fans, because who's going to necessarily listen to somebody who's suffering from schizophrenia, right? So this is something that one has to wonder whether or not it was a preordained order to find something of this sort in an effort to take Peterson down off of his pedestal and his ability to communicate salient points to those who admire him, to his fans, to those who wish to counter the radical left, which this writer is a part of. The second part of the interview that I found absolutely atrocious was that it was a hit job on Peterson's daughter, Michaela, who in fact saved his life, and we're going to get to that in a second. But a quote, unrecognizable from the ordinary-looking brunette from photos just a few years ago, Michaela today is a glossy, pouting Barbie blonde and talks with the zealous, spiky conviction of a President Trump press spokeswoman. Okay, I have a big issue with this. This article should not be about Michaela at all, yet you are using the power of your platform to denigrate her and to make her look bad. Why? What is the purpose of this? Are you just exemplifying the fact that you're a bad woman, a bad person? Decca Aitkenhead, once again, the writer of said column, and then to compare her to a President Trump press spokeswoman. How is this of any importance? I truly don't understand. How is this salient to what we're going to learn about Jordan Peterson? Jealous? Are you jealous?
You have a problem being jelly.
Should I call the jelly school, the jelly police, maybe?
Hello, is this a jelly school? Okay, I have a girl here who's extremely jelly. I'll see if you can take her in for a few weeks.
I don't know, Decca. you are making yourself out to be a pretty intolerant person. Then, she continues, according to her website, she has suffered from juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, an autoimmune disorder, since early childhood, which necessitated a hip and ankle replacement at 17. According to her website. So the Petersons are just making this all up. You want to cast doubt on this? According to her website, what a framing device this is in order to cast dispersion, in order to cast doubt upon these statements, which are eminently fact-checkable. And I'm sure that the Petersons, who are very forthcoming with their medical information, as we'll find out in a moment, would release from the Children's Hospital in Toronto. This has been documented. But the writer has to say, according to her website. She continues, like every medical autodidact I've ever met, Michaela rattles off pharmacological jargon at 100 miles an hour, sweeping from one outlandish tale to another with breathless melodrama that becomes increasingly exhausting to follow. Once again, we came here to read about Jordan Peterson, and you are extending your ire to his daughter as she tries to give you every detail, and you scold her for it rather than telling her the names of the drugs that she might be mentioning are unimportant, or you could have just easily ignored it as extraneous information unimportant to your article. But once again, this woman, Decca Aitkenhead, the writer, is seeking to denigrate, to throw a bomb in the direction of Mikhaila Peterson. Once again, should I call the jelly school?
Hello, is this a jelly school?
This one just shows the illogic of the writer. After 80 minutes on Zoom, the one thing of which I'm certain is that were I as close to death as she assures me her father repeatedly was, this was not the person I would entrust with saving my life. Why? Because she actually, by some miracle, did save Jordan Peterson's life. Again, how does your jelly of Michaela belong in this piece other than showing your bias and your bad faith? I guess for that, we should be thanking you, Decca. Continuing. Has she ever, I wonder, felt perceived by the medical profession as the problem? Completely, yes, 100%. I've been problematic for a while. She starts to laugh. I'm pretty pushy when I think something is wrong. She doesn't have any actual medical training, though, I point out. Doesn't she worry about the responsibility she has assumed for her father's treatment? But because of my experience of being ill, I've done a lot of research. There's this trust that people have of doctors that I don't have, because doctors are just people, right? This is an opinion not uncommon in North America, where surprising numbers regard YouTube as a viable substitute for medical school. I'm dying to ask him why he submitted to this medical circus orchestrated by his daughter against his doctor's orders, because Michaela has stated that Jordan gets very emotional and distraught when trying to recount his medical journey, so that's why she's doing it for him. But at the end of this long and often bewildering account from his daughter, I still can't tell if her father will be cogent or incoherent. I don't know what to expect, and Michaela will, of course, be monitoring our conversation. Maybe they really were the cause of all his problems. The more he talks, though, the more I wonder whether toxic masculinity might have been a culprit too. Toxic masculinity. The presupposition one would have to take from this, first of all, is that it actually exists. Also, it just appears to be the whip that the writer wishes to use to inflict great amounts of pain on the Petersons. Toxic masculinity, this leftist talking point that she slides into the column. It's like she's writing to one small subset of the population, and she just wants to virtue signal and say, I see toxic masculinity wherever it might go. Continuing, parallels with Donald Trump come to mind. Another unhappy man, closed off from his emotions, projecting strong man mythology while hunkered down in a bunker with his family against the world. Closed off from his emotions.
When people share good news about their life, people don't necessarily respond positively. You know, they don't get encouragement. And people need so little encouragement. It's just unbelievable. And so they'll tell me something good, and I think, oh, that's so good. Somebody says, oh, I'm getting along way better with my father. I haven't seen him for 10 years, and now we get along. It's like, God, great. Yeah. And then the power of that, you can't overstate the power of that for individuals to get their life together. The individual is an unbelievably powerful force, and every single person who gets their act together a little bit has the capacity to spread that around them. It's a chain reaction, and so it's a lovely thing to see. And
that's fantastic.
Not only that, he did so in the interview. The entire interview, once again, was released by the Petersons, and you can hear him choke up. He has to excuse himself from the conversation. So what she's reporting is patently false, and she knows it. And yet, once again, she invokes the name of Donald Trump, another unhappy man closed off from his emotions. Is she projecting her own life onto the Petersons? Because if you delve into Decca Aitkenhead's life, she married a serial druggie who ruined many people's lives, cheating with him originally on her first husband. She's got a lot of pain in her life. This man was swept out to sea. Yeah, this is somebody who's definitely projecting her own life onto Dr. Peterson, her own emotions. And anybody who knows Dr. Peterson knows that he's not closed off. And once again, you are just hammering home Donald Trump. So here's a long section that I'm just going to read for you verbatim. When I recorded the audiobook in November, I was akathasic almost the entire time. His voice raises and fills with pride. I would go to the studio virtually convulsing in the car. I was moving just frenetically. And then I'd get upstairs into the studio and force myself to not move for 2 hours. If you would have asked me to lay odds on the probability that I would have lived to finish the recording, I would have bet you 10 to 1 that I wouldn't have. But I did the recording. And it was the same with the book, because not to have would have been worse. So to the degree that I can explain how I was able to manage it, I'm not going to talk about willpower and courage. I'm going to talk about the lesser of two evils. Except, of course, that he has ended up framing his story in terms of his willpower and courage is the final line of the article. I really believe that this is somebody who feels very badly about life, that doesn't believe that willpower and courage stand for much or mean much like the left does, that always wants the excuse of somebody else being responsible for their ills, that they have no control over life, and then she is once again projecting that onto him. So look, this article is the reason that long-form podcasts like Joe Rogan, like Ben Shapiro interviewing somebody, or Dan Crenshaw, whatever you want to take, or even somebody from the left doing a long-form podcast is where we gravitate to, because otherwise we are taking an author's prejudices, what they want to distill the information of a 3-hour interview down to, whatever that might be. You are reading a short excerpt which is framed, and once again, you have to look at the schizophrenia that she managed to add in to the column to make it seem as though he was schizophrenic and diagnosed as such, that we are getting a very false narrative from the media. And once again, long-form interviews like Joe Rogan are taking over for this very reason, because we are able to interpret the nuance. We are able to take the meaning from something and the lessons from something rather than what somebody else is trying to spoon feed us. And this is why CNN, MSNBC, there are going to be people that just want the candy bar and want that little bit of sugar rush and try to get some idea as to what's going on in the world. But more and more people are switching over to long-form interviews. And this article is exemplifying why that is the case. If you guys like this, if you guys learned something, share it with a friend. Thumb up the video. Peace and blessings to everybody out there. If you're new, subscribe to the channel. All notification bell. Peace and blessings.